This is John Nugent.
I'm Ron Peters.
And I'm Sam Long.
Welcome to the After Class Podcast.
Because the best conversations happen
after class. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the After Class Podcast. Glad to have you along. It is with great sadness that we come to you this episode. This episode will air a couple weeks after the events, but we have lost some titans of our youth to death.
to say the least. Yeah.
We had Ozzy Osbourne, Hulk Hogan, and Malcolm Jamal Warner.
Yep. All lost in a very short period of time. You got to get the three.
Separately, though. They weren't on the same plane or anything.
Right, exactly. But yeah, anytime celebrities go, you always got to give them threes. And yeah, the big one for me is Ozzy. Not because I think he was the greatest guy in the world. He had a very tragic life, actually. He was a very sad youth and man who basically abused his body beyond normal human limits. But you can't deny that he was an icon in the music world. The guy knew how to pick guitarists, I'll tell you that. He had some great guitarists work for him. And so, yeah, I'll admit, there's a little sadness trying to get through my days, thinking about the fact that Ozzy's not around to, illuminate my world anymore, bite the heads off bats and things like that.
Is there one, Sam, that you were closer to?
Oh,
among
definitely
the
Hulk
three?
Hogan.
Yeah.
So we've talked about this, how our music styles, I was at that shift to more grungy alternative, and you guys are the more classical metal stuff. And so Ozzy's yeah, okay, fine, but didn't really impact me a whole lot. But Hulk Hogan was of my youth, waking up Saturday mornings watching WWF, it was amazing. That one WrestleMania against Andre the Giant at the Silverdome, that's just that'll live on forever in my brain.
Yeah, he's probably the one I was closest to as well. If you're talking about how much exposure, I probably had more I probably spent more time with Malcolm Jamal Warner, just in terms of episodes and stuff that.
Cosby
I enjoyed that
Show
show
and
a
all
lot. But Hulk Hogan, as far as someone who was iconic, my dad used to call me the Hulkster because I would watch all the games, and me and my friends would practice wrestling figure 4 leg locks on each other.
Oh,
and
sure.
I would try to do that to my little brother, and it was
Could
just
see that.
it was a huge part. I went to a handful of live wrestling matches. This is all in the WWF era.
Yep.
And they had the serial cartoons. I mean,
Yeah.
that was such a pervasive movement of fake sports.
Yeah.
But Hulk Hogan was he was a role model,
Yeah.
and a positive force for good. And I know there's something about him that appealed to a lot of us at that time.
It's funny because I didn't follow wrestling when I was a kid. My first exposure to Hulk Hogan was in one of the Rocky movies. I think what camera was Rocky 3.
Three.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
First time I ever saw him, how he towered over, Rocky in that movie.
And he's not that tall. Hulk Hogan's not a tall.
Yeah, he's a short guy.
And I think they did some tricks with cameras and stuff like that.
Possibly.
To make him
Probably
look even better.
standing on a box. Yeah.
Yeah. But Ozzy to me, I would say he was a late bloomer for me. I was a late bloomer for Ozzy because there was so much, lore surrounding him as being a Satan cult leader and biting the heads off bats and, leading people to the devil. And then he got into he had lyrical battles with televangelists, right?
Exactly,
and so he was anti-religion. And so I was kind of conflicted as someone who was trying to be a Christian. And it's just I love the sound of this guy's music.
Right,
But he's
exactly.
the Antichrist. And so it's as I got older and I realized, yeah, that's highly exaggerated. And I got to the point where I could appreciate his music more. And
Yeah, because it was a shtick. And I'll grant that he played it to the max, the devil worshiper and all that. But the guy was too screwed up to be a Satanist priest. He's just like I said, he abused himself so horribly, and he's just an entertainer. And he knew that he could sell tickets by playing that particular card, and he played it really well. And the thing about Ozzy, like I said, he's a great vocalist and great music, but he just had great guitarists. Tony Iommi and Black Sabbath, and then Randy Rhoads. When he went solo, he got kicked out of Black Sabbath. So what does he do? Hires Randy Rhoads. It becomes just enormous success. And then, after that, Jakey Lee, who was good. But then he had Zakk Wylde, which was just another era in Ozzy. And just all these great guitarists that I think helped catapult him to that the rarefied air of hard rock and metal and all that.
Favorite song?
You Can't Kill Rock and Roll. It's not one you hear on the radio very often. It was a radio hit. It was off Diary of a Madman, but that's one of my all-time absolute favorite songs. You Can't Kill Rock and Roll. Just the guitar work and the lyrics and everything are just fantastic.
Sam?
No comment.
I'm a huge fan of Crazy Train. I know it's the most popular one, but
It
like
is.
lyrically, I just think it's strong.
It is. You said it. It could be a
Yeah.
Christian song.
Exactly. Like the message of that song and the brokenness of reality and stuff like that, like it's theologically strong and it's a driving rock and roll song, the kind I like to jam out to. So
Absolutely.
I'm gonna have to listen to that song. I'm not sure I know that song you're talking about.
Once you hear it, you'll go, "Oh, I remember
Okay,
it." But it's so rare they play it on the radio, to my regret, because I just think it's a great song.
And I have this playlist on my phone, songs where the word rock plays a prominent role
Oh,
in the
wow.
song, and that's not on my list. And
I
I have
gotta add
like
it.
a ton of them.
Right.
I probably have 200 songs in that playlist, and
Now you got to hit
that one
201.
probably needs to be added. So,
Totally agree.
I love rock and roll.
Joan Jett,
I love rock and roll.
yeah.
There you go.
This fall, I'm going to see her for the third time. Like she's open for 3 bands that I really want to see.
Oh,
and
really?
She puts on a decent show.
Good for her.
Still.
She's got a good,
Still, yeah.
yeah, and lyrically because her voice is kind of raspy, it just carried well into aging, and so it just sounds like her.
Yeah.
So anyway,
There's our reminiscing for the day. And if
Pop
you wanna,
culture.
I mean, if you want to drop your favorite memories from those 3,
Right.
you're welcome to do that in the chat.
Send us an email. Put it on the socials.
All right. Well, we're going to continue with our Humor in the Bible series, our Holy Humor series, and we have a turning point today. We've reached the New Testament. Apparently, we're avoiding the Apocrypha. We talked about that
not too
last
many
time.
people
That
know the
there are a lot of humorous type things in the Apocrypha. But we turn our attention to the New Testament. A lot of excitement for Ron.
Sure. Yeah.
And
One-third of the
I would just
Bible.
say, I think what we see here is, I think for me, there's a change in kind of the type of humor. There are a lot of good stories in the Old Testament, and there are a couple still in the New Testament. But here we're going to have a lot more, I think, sarcasm and puns and hyperbole and those sorts of things, which is just kind of a different type of humor. So,
yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, when you get to the New Testament, stories are the Gospels and Acts. That's where you get the narrative, which is so much like the Old Testament. But if you look at our list, almost all of them are from the Gospels and Acts. We only have 3 from the letters, and there's probably more in there, but the letters aren't as humorous as some Old Testament poetry.
Yeah,
Correct.
there's a little bit. When Paul gets on a roll, sometimes he'll slip into that, dark humor moment.
a little snarky too.
Yeah,
but-
but you don't see it very often. I agree.
So we're going to get going and starting in Matthew chapter 7. This in the context of the Sermon on the Mount. And there are various things in this where Jesus uses some hyperbole and some mental images. And this is one's pretty well known to most people. I'll read chapter 7, verse 1. Do not judge that you may not be judged. For the judgment you give will be the judgment you get, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but did not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, let me take the speck out of your eye, while the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, then you'll see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. And so here we have this, this mental image. And I mean, like I said, most people know this sort of little pericope and this little image. And again, it's intended to be over the top.
Exactly.
Like, first of all, if you've got a log coming out of your eye, you've got major problems.
Bigger problems than judging your neighbor, probably. You need to
Right.
be taken to the emergency room.
But of course, that's Jesus' point, is to make it so, like, you got so much going on in your life. I think you should start with that and then turn to your neighbor when all that's done. And yeah.
Well, and I think that the idea that who are you to judge? Like having a log in your eye, you have so many problems. Here you are judging your neighbor, and you don't even realize just all the ways that people could judge you in the moment. And so, yeah, I think it is hyperbolic. And we're going to see some other examples of that in Jesus' teaching where he uses these images that are just so over the top.
Yeah.
Even in that time, people are like, oh, that's ridiculous. But it's that kind of hyperbole that gets people's attention and helps drive the point home, puts a real sharp point on it.
Yeah. Since we're talking about humor in the New Testament, did you guys watch when it came out the Visual Bible series,
I did not.
the Gospel
I don't
of
think I did,
Matthew?
no.
It's I think it was like a 4. It just kind of dates it, a 4 CHS set that eventually got converted to DVD. But there's a Jesus who, a character, I forget his actor name, but who plays Jesus in the visual Bible series. And he's referred to as the laughing Jesus.
Yes.
Like
Oh, yeah.
his whole way of presenting Jesus is funny. And Jesus gets a kick out of people. He gets a kick out of his own jokes. And so I just remember him telling this story in the Sermon on the Mount, acting it out. And so like he's like, his inflection is like, how can you take this speck, call out the
Right,
speck
yeah.
in your neighbor when you've got a log? And you guys can see me, but the listeners can't. Like he's holding up this giant log in front of his face, like that's not really there, but like, and he's kind of staggering, like, and he's like hams up the crowd and stuff like that. And if you want to see, the Gospel of Matthew like played out in such a way that would potentially show how much humor was in Jesus' ministry, I think the characteristic of that visual Bible series, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
The
I'll
way
check
it's
it out.
done, I like because it's word for word from the text.
Okay. Yeah.
They don't add any dialogue. They just depict the Gospel of Matthew using the words of the Gospel of Matthew, and so so it's a very literal, rendition. There's not a lot of creative license, except the kind of when we read things like the Sermon on the Mount, we have a tone in mind,
Right.
Yep.
and we can be like, if we tend to lean toward legalism, we can be like, how can you, when you have a log, how can you like point out a speck, you idiot, like jerk, like hypocrite, like we can like frame it as Jesus is kind of talking down and mean.
Yeah.
And they, I think to their credit, do a good job of saying, why do you think Jesus was so mean? Like,
Yeah, it's a good question.
People liked being around him. He was fun at a party, right? They were
Right.
attracted to him. Commoners were attracted to him. There had to be something about his presentation that was light, entertaining, but convictional.
Right.
And I think they did a good job of trying to capture that aspect and probably found humor. They erred in the direction of finding humor in more places than maybe is warranted. But I appreciate the way they depicted this will always be kind of in my head for that. So
Yeah, I think now that you mentioned, I have seen that, at least that clip of that, because it is kind of very stark. Because it's interesting to see how different depictions do it, and most of them go with the, at least in this passage, a little more in the serious tone. But that is a nice change up. And I mean, it is fascinating. I mean, you got the Sermon on the Mount, and if you think it was a sermon at one time, like there's a lot of uplifting, encouraging things.
I agree.
And so
yeah.
it makes sense that if it were one sort of cohesive sermon, sort of on some level, that it's not all going to be Debbie Downers, because he's bringing like blessing to the downtrodden.
Exactly,
They're going
yeah.
to turn around and be like, "You stupid hypocrites." I mean, I don't know,
Right.
maybe, but
Well, no, I think that it's Jesus is calling people to join him. He's not beating people down. And I think there are some people who think that to be religious, it has to be like heavy and somber and all that. And there are certainly moments where I think that's appropriate. But when Jesus is trying to invite people to join him in this vision that he's casting for the kingdom, he's not going to beat people down in order to get them to join him. He's going to cast a vision that's going to invite people in a very positive way. And so I think there are going to be lighthearted moments. And I think that's just good storytelling as well. That, you have those heavy moments, but you got to break it up with a little bit of lighthearted moments to keep the balance in there and not, drive people away.
And I think it's strong theologically. I mean, because when we talk about people and the people we enjoy being around and people who are fun at parties, like, humor is a big part of what it means to be human and to be in community, right?
Without
Like,
a doubt.
we joke with each other all the time, and friends typically do that. And where did our penchant for humor come from? Like, Jesus is fully human, right? And he displays for us the best way of being human. And so you would have to think, since humor and just kidding around with people playfully is one of the things that most draws us to other humans and like sets us at ease and gives us enjoyment, to assume that Jesus did that better than other people
Right. Yeah.
is I think a pretty accurate assumption.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he knew he knew when to land the joke. Like some of us can tell a joke and we're like, wow, that was really bad timing. It would have been funny in a different moment, but you didn't read the room very well. Jesus probably knew how to read the room. He knew when it's like humor would be really inappropriate right now, but then he knew exactly when to do it. And like in the current, TV show The Chosen, there are moments when Jesus is just hilarious. Um, in one of the, I can't remember which season it was, but he healed a man, and then he gathered his disciples, and they were all talking to him. And at the end of the conversation, it's like nighttime, we gotta go home, and he makes a joke, and nobody got it. Like everybody just stared at him. He just looked around and went, "Too soon?"
Yes,
You know,
I
it's
remember
like-
that too soon.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's like everybody was like, "Did he make a joke? Are we supposed to laugh at this?" She's like, "Come on, guys, it's all right. You can laugh."
And the fact that children were drawn to him, like
Oh,
he,
yeah,
he
without
you
doubt.
know, he had to tease and be playful for them to feel really comfortable coming up to a revered
point.
teacher.
Yeah, very good point.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've only seen I think the first season of Chosen, but that's what I do like about how they pace it so that it just alternates. Where he's very joyous, but there's times where he can be serious, and and often it's with like an individual, he's serious with them. But so I think they're doing a pretty good job of sort of balancing
mixing
the
it up,
personality of Jesus. I will say, just going with what you're talking about, I just noticed that going back to in the chapter 6, talking about adultery. So he will, sorry, it's chapter 5. So adultery is a pretty serious topic,
Yeah.
right? And then at the end of it, he talks about, cutting off your arm and poking out your eye and throwing it away. Like, it's not ha funny, but it's, again, this mental image that's over the top.
Yeah.
And so even in the midst of something pretty serious, he's throwing in something a little, like that'd be crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's a ludicrous image, but that's how he teaches, and so that's good. It's good pedagogy, and so he can bring it all together to be just a great teacher.
We can learn from him. Excuse me. Continuing the Sermon on the Mount, another instance of this is just a few verses after the one that Sam just read. Beginning in verse 7, it's the ask, seek, knock section. Ask will be given to you, search you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. And the next part, it's more of this hyperbole. For everyone who asks receives, everyone who searches. Man, see, I'm going back to the old King James, my muscle memory.
Yep.
But I'm reading NRSV, it's the wrong word. Everyone who searches finds, and for everyone who knocks, the door will be open. Is there anyone among you my gosh, is there anyone among you who, if your child asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If then you are no. Can we just stop the podcast? I can't talk today.
We're
Oh my
we're pushing
gosh.
through.
You got this.
I know, we gotta
You're
push
about
through
to
it.
land the key line.
Exactly. If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him?
All right. In Ron's defense, he's reading from the Greek. You're translating as you read.
No, I was reading English. It's Greek-English parallel.
Oh, it's a parallel.
really appreciate
I was
that.
really impressed. I'm looking over there. I'm seeing Greek. I'm like, that's pretty smooth, Ron.
I mean, yes, I could do that. I wasn't trying to do
Oh,
that. So I
gotcha.
really appreciate your attempt to defend me on that. I'm sorry I had to.
I was going to
Brown
say,
bubble.
to Ron's credit, he's reading something that has a font of like 0.6, so
Yeah, right.
that's even more impressive.
that's
it's
a
very
problem
small.
in biblical language studies.
Thank you,
In
guys.
general.
Very small
really
font.
Appreciate it. But I do love this, and it's another example of a little hyperbole. Giving him a stone, giving him a snake. In Luke's gospel, Luke says a scorpion.
Yeah.
Which is even a little bit funnier. And as a preview, I think Luke actually does more to make people laugh. I think he deliberately weaves some stuff in there. But the idea that if your child asks for something good, you would give something scary or harmful or worthless to them. And so, if you who are evil, you wicked people, which is kind of going back to what we're saying, Jesus is speaking to a crowd, and he's like, if you bunch of horrible Ozzy Osbourne loving people out there,
Wow.
if that's the kind of people
head
you
biting
are,
off people.
exactly, biting off the heads of bats and everything, if that's the kind of people you are, how much more is your Father going to be better than that?
Yeah, and I have to think, like, when he's saying, you who are evil, like, I have a hard time imagining him saying that in a very, like, judgmental, harsh way. Like, I think this is a funny line. Like, you evil people, like, in comparison to me, in comparison to God, like, you're clearly evil in comparison to us, and yet you know how to give a gift. Well, like, think about what that means for God, who is not evil, who is all good and all loving.
Yeah, I get the impression, it reminds me of like when someone does something and then someone makes a joke and they go, so imagine like I don't know, you're in a room full of people and most of them have gotten into a car accident. And he goes, those people who can't drive, and then and that's a funny line that you then
Yep.
follow with something, and that's the impression I get here that those evil people, you all, and then and then you finish the line talking about God, and so yeah, I also don't read it as like super harsh, as more of a little jokey.
Yeah, and there's got to be. Part of me just wants to even see him like almost like looking out the side of his eye.
Yeah.
I don't think he winks at the crowd. That'd be a little too obvious. But something along that line that tips his hand a little bit to say, I'm using strong language, but you understand what I mean, right?
Yeah. Yep. All right, moving right along. Matthew 17:24-27. When they reached Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and said, "Does your teacher not pay the temple tax?" He said, "Yes, he does." And when he came home, Jesus spoke of it first, asking, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth take toll or tribute? From their children or from others?" When Peter said, "From others," Jesus said to him, "Then the children are free. However, so that we do not give offense to them, go to the sea and cast a hook. Take the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth, you will find a coin. Take that and give it to them for you and for me." I love that because Jesus has this really interesting relationship to the governing authorities, right, and the tax collectors for Rome, and he's representing another kingdom. His kingdom is so much superior to theirs and going to be eclipsing theirs, and and he's constantly being tested. Are you here to like launch a revolt against the Roman Empire? Or are you subverting the whole system and trying to take us down? And Jesus just doesn't want to get into that game. Like that's not his agenda. It's not his means or his methods. So he pays taxes not by like collecting from the people and paying it like go to the water and grab a fish out of the water and there will be your coin. Yeah. It's just he's not doing what they're asking him to do, like of the stuff that you worked for or the funds that you've raised, we want our cut. Like he doesn't give them really what they want, which is for it to cost Jesus. Like right. He like exactly. Miraculously has a fish cough up a coin and says, "Yeah, that'll do," and it's got to smell like it's out of a fish's mouth, and like take this smelly coin and then give that to the authority, and so he's satisfying the letter of their law in a way that doesn't ruffle feathers, but at the same time, he's not playing their game.
There's a little bit of commentary there, and so you're right. You want it, you got it. Here's your tax. I'm not going to deny you what you're asking for. It's just going to smell really bad, and all the other coins are going to smell bad. And yeah, I did it in this really, really weird way that nobody else can do. So yeah, there's some underlying commentary there on the system that I'll do what you want me to do, but I'm not going to play your game.
And I'd love to see the replay of that, like of him grabbing the fish, of him opening the mouth, of him finding a coin. I think it would be comical. I think he would be laughing as he's pulling the coin out of the fish's mouth. Like, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe it worked. This is crazy.
Exactly.
This is crazy.
Yeah. Have they gotten that far in The Chosen?
Well, we're into... So this last season ended with the arrest of Jesus in Gethsemane.
Oh,
so they did not show that.
Okay.
So. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they.
Yeah,
they just didn't
they do a lot, and so I can't do everything. But yeah, I agree. That would be a humorous, like Peter just like shaking his head, like that Jesus.
Right. Yeah, he's meeting the requirement, but he's not playing their game.
Yep.
Yeah, comical.
All right, we skipped to the next chapter, Matthew chapter 18, and this is a pretty well-known story as well, where the parable of the unforgiving servant is what my heading calls it. Probably it's called other things, where a man owes a significant amount of money. It says 10,000 talents, where he's ordered to pay up, and he says, "I can't do it," and he falls down at the mercy of the ruler, and they says, "All right, you're forgiven." Then that guy goes out and finds the guy who owes him far less and expects him to pay up. And beats him and all these other things, and the ruler finds out about it and says, "Oh, so you're ungrateful, so now you'll go to jail and it'll go bad for everyone." And the humorous part, the story is not humorous necessarily, but the humorous part is that he owes 10,000 talents. Ron, how much is 10,000 talents in the Greco-Roman world?
It's up into the realm of, to put it in modern dollars, in the realm of billions of dollars. It's a crazy amount of money. more money than anybody could really earn in a single lifetime.
Or pay back.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting into the realm of the elite, the super rich. And part of what does make it kind of funny is the guy's like, give me more time and I'll pay you back.
Right.
Like that
right.
very line. Oh, I can do it. And the guy's like, you're not going to pay this back. Now, the idea that he would have been loaned that amount of money is also kind of ridiculous. The very notion. And so I think this is another example of where Jesus just stretches it beyond believability. But it's not because a person would lend out that kind of money or that a person might try to pay it back, but it's illustrative of the immensity of the debt that we owe God and God's willingness to say, we're good. And in fact, to me, this has always been one of the a great parable to challenge the notion of, I just lost the term I was trying to think of, but where Jesus pays the debt that we owe. That view of atonement, substitutionary atonement, where God's up there going, somebody's got to pay. Many people are
somebody's got to pay this.
Yep, there's a debt that's got to be paid. Somebody's got to pay the debt. Jesus is the one who pays the debt.
If we were to do a dynamic translation, we might say, and then, a man owes someone $1 bajillion.
Right.
It's just funny out there way, and you're like, oh, wow, that's intense. And then that just becomes a stark contrast for someone who owes him very little.
Well, the other guy, it's like he's going out saying, I want my $2. It's like Better Off Dead or some movie like that, because it's just such an insignificant amount compared to the immensity of his own debt. And that does make me laugh, because I can always think of that kid on the bike chasing down the guy saying, I want my $2 in that movie. So.
Yeah,
go ahead.
It's not adding much. I get the impression this guy was a degenerate gambler, and he's racked it all up by betting on the gladiator games, and he just keeps this one. I'm going to hit it. I just got to double my money 15 times, and then.
I remember there was a Looney Tunes cartoon about the gambling bug. It was just literally a bug, and he kept biting a cat's ear, and every time he bit his ear, he'd have to go off and gamble. Some dog.
Okay.
You guys ever?
No, I haven't seen that one.
I'm dating myself. But it was, there are people out there going, oh, yeah, I remember that comic or that cartoon. It was the gambling bug. Couldn't stop. Sorry.
You had more? Or did I ruin it with my degenerate gambler comment?
No, I was just thinking of just locating where the humor is. So the humor is just in the contrast. It's a ridiculous contrast.
Yeah.
And that's the way Jesus told stories.
Yep.
And, it's humorous until it gets serious.
Yep.
And that's, again, we shouldn't think that he was always straight-laced and everything. There's this mixture that is probably just the right balance.
Well, and I think that good speakers can do that. They draw you in, and there's some laughter, and you share the joke, and then there's that moment where it turns, and it gets serious. And if you know how to put together a speech and to craft your words, you can weave those together really nicely, to where people laugh just hard enough to enjoy the moment, and then are able to back off of that and go, all right, now we're talking about something serious. And you don't want too extreme either way. And I think Jesus really knew how to do that. All right. Next one comes from the following chapter. I'm so glad this one landed on me, because it's in chapter 19, Matthew 19 and verse 12. Jesus says, for there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. And I think a lot of people are like, people made themselves eunuchs? What they do. It kind of makes me think of Origen, the Christian, late 2nd century Christian, who he had such a problem with lust that he castrated himself, thinking that somehow that would, curb his lustful desires. I think he was unsuccessful in that regard. But the idea that people would make themselves eunuchs, I don't think Jesus means literally cutting off their members, but rather people who choose to live a celibate life. But the idea of, there are people who make themselves eunuchs. I'm sure there are people who were, they just kind of startled them for a moment. It's like, who in the world would do something like that? And then they realize, okay, this is probably more of a metaphor. But the idea of someone making himself a eunuch is still a little the ways people might go about doing that creates a very funny image in my mind.
Yeah. All right. Nothing more on that. You don't
Yeah,
do too much on
we
castrated
we
members.
did talk about eunuchs in the Old Testament
Yep.
section, so we're fine on that.
All right. Moving along to Matthew 19:24. This is another well-known one. I'll start in verse 23. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Truly I tell you, it will be hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God." And just the image, and there are all sorts of ways people try to interpret this passage, and
Yeah, there's been some bad stuff out there.
The eye of a needle is a certain gate in Jerusalem, and
Yeah, it's common.
when you're riding on a camel, the camel has to like kneel down, and the rider, and it's really tricky to get, but you get through. It's just hard work,
Right.
and or Jesus is given a ridiculous image,
Yeah.
and literally, a needle. Back in that day, I don't know if the eye of a needle was as small back in the day than it can be today with machine
Probably
technology.
not, yeah. But still
but the
really
size of a camel getting through even a quarter size needle hole is not going to happen. But the image it conjures up, and you have to think that's just a hysterical. I mean, you could have said, a dog, right? And it wouldn't have been as funny.
Right.
It would be equally impossible. But like a camel, this kind of gangly, lumpy, awkward, moving,
Yeah.
big knee joint thing squeezing through an eye of an. It's a hysterical image.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a pattern here where Jesus uses a lot of hyperbole, particularly recorded in Matthew's gospel, to make these points. And you're right that it's a gate. We called it the eye of the needle. He could get through it, but he just had to kneel down. It was hard work. It's like, that's not historically accurate at all. Would love to find the first person who tried to argue that and figure out how everybody else got caught up in that particular error.
Yeah. What do you think is motivating that explanation? That there is a literal gate that was called the eye of the needle.
They're trying to protect wealth.
Right.
They want wealthy people to go, "Oh yeah, you can get in. It's not a problem. It just might be a little bit more challenging for
Be a little
you.
uncomfortable, but
Yeah, you can do it." It's people who want to hold on to their wealth. It reminds me. We're not going to talk about this story, but the wealthy man who came to Jesus asking, "What do I have to do to have eternal life?" And Jesus says, "Do this, do this, do this." And the guy says, "I've done it all." And Jesus says, "One last thing: sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and follow me." And the guy went away sad because he was wealthy. They don't want to think about that story and trying to interpret this one. But that's Jesus' whole point, is that wealth is a real impediment to really embracing the kingdom. And so people want to come up with a way to make it easier on the wealthy.
and so I think poor folk in the audience would have found this particularly humorous.
Without a doubt.
The rich may not have liked the analogy, but the poor were like, "That sounds about right."
Yeah.
They've been impressing me their whole life.
Right.
Thank you, Jesus, for bringing a smile to my face.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, there's more camel humor.
Camels were very common animals, evidently.
This is Matthew 23, and this has always been one of my favorite chapters. Where this one, I think Jesus is laying into people, like actually at times, but then he'll throw in humorous things. So it's like he understands how to work a crowd, and in the midst of it, he's a lot of woes to you and your terrible people and your snakes. But he says in verse 23 of chapter 23, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You tithe mint, dill, and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. It is these you ought to have practiced without neglecting the others. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel." Oh. Yes, and so the idea is like they're so focused on this one thing that they're ignoring this other, and it could be like for me and John, you might appreciate this. It's like you strain out the mushrooms in the cream of mushroom soup, which are really quite small.
Yes,
but then
yes,
you
you do.
eat a whole monster, gross thing of it. Like that's for me the comparison.
Yeah, what real life practice did they have where they would be straining? And it seems like straining for the purposes of consumption.
Yeah,
You know
so
what I'm saying? Like, what is the context in the first century where they're straining out a gnat from something they would consume? Like,
I mean, is this just like a purity law where you're really concerned about not eating anything unclean. And so it's really easy to avoid, pigs or things like that. But, even certain insects are not considered clean. It's like you can eat a locust, but you can't eat anything else. So I wonder if it's this obsession with purity that makes you go, oh, there is this teeny little thing in there that's impure. I can't swallow that. But darn it, I'll swallow a camel, even though that's technically an unclean animal.
Yeah. So you would locate it in the context of clean food laws or
That
clean
would be my
consumption
understanding
laws.
of it,
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense in light of the swallowing, right?
Right, yeah.
You get something gross for something even grosser would be like my like you're okay with that, but you're missing the point, which is I think gnats would fall under the unclean insects, right?
So what happens if
I'm not sure.
if one flew into your mouth? It happens every now and then. You get a bug in your mouth, not deliberately. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm unclean until sundown and all this. Wasn't my fault.
And it's another case where this is about exaggerated contrasts, right? I mean, a camel is, a bajillion times bigger than a gnat. Like, and it's totally, it's easier for, I mean, just like the eye of the needle, the camel can't go through the eye of a needle, so you can't possibly swallow a camel. And the scribes and Pharisees are like morally or religiously swallowing camels while nitpicking about the gnats. And it just reminds you of the speck and the log.
Yep.
That this is the third time he's used similar contrasts to talk about the people who obsess about the minutia and this huge thing that matters more to God, they seem to be blind to. So it's a pretty big slam.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, it's a big slam.
And again, funny for those who are not scribes and Pharisees.
Correct. I would also say gnats would be a swarming insect, which would be unclean. So I would put them in the unclean
Okay, that
category.
makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. For our listeners at home who are very concerned about that.
Matthew's not the only one who records some funny words from Jesus, and some of them are part of like the triple tradition, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But we want to show a little bit of love to Mark here, not leave him out. And so we've got one passage from Mark's Gospel in chapter 5, beginning in verse 11. It says, "Now there on a hillside a great herd of swine was feeding." I guess I should give the context for this. I jumped ahead. Sorry about that, listeners.
Very excited.
Yeah, well, I was. So Jesus is in the country of Gadara or Gerasa, or whichever word the particular gospel writer uses, encounters one or two demon-possessed man. There's some debate about that, depending on which gospel you're reading. And he decides he's going to cast out the demons. And the demons are like, don't throw us out into the wilderness. Let us go someplace else. So Mark writes, "Now there on the hillside was a great herd of swine. They were feeding, and the unclean spirits begged him, 'Send us into the swine, let us enter them.' So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea." And so, again, not necessarily hilarious, haha, funny, but there's a certain dark humor to these demons going, don't send us out, into the abyss or the wilderness or whatever it is they're afraid of. They're like, just let us go someplace else. And Jesus is like, fine, just get out of these guys, go wherever you want. And so they see some pigs, they're like, we'll get into their bodies. But the pigs go crazy, run off the cliff into the ocean, they all drown. And like watching a herd of 2,000 pigs rumbling down the side of a hill into the ocean is kind of a funny image in my mind. It's not as funny as biting the head off a bat, but I mean, it's still kind of I keep circling back to Ozzy there.
Yeah, and to me, part of what's humorous about this is an encounter between this unnatural, somehow the spirits of the deceased have found their way back on Earth and are tormenting individuals, and they don't want to be set back to the abyss where they likely came from. And so they have this brilliant idea of going into the pigs, and just like, sure, I'll send you into the pigs. And then the pigs march into the sea, which is one of the gateways to the abyss.
Right.
Like, so there's a little bit of the irony there. Like, they think they have a way around the abyss.
Loophole.
The pigs. And Jesus is like, sure, I'll give you that. And you wonder, like, whether, God is the reason why the pigs ran into the abyss.
Right.
Like, no, you're going to the abyss one way or another. You shouldn't be
Not getting
here.
out of this.
You're tormenting people. Jesus came to bring healing and wholeness and to free people from bondage. And you're going where you need to go. And so the fact that he used the pigs to send them into the abyss anyway is hysterical.
Yep. Agreed. Poor pigs.
Yeah. Poor pigs.
Yeah, they were the collateral. And it raises the question, I mean, is this a Jewish region? Are there Jewish people here who are dabbling in pig farming who shouldn't be? And so at the same time, is there something going on with pigs being unclean and maybe some people are making a livelihood out of this? Or do you think these are Gentiles?
It's hard to say because it's this is on the east side of Sea of Galilee, and it's definitely a mixed region. Ethnically, you've got Greeks and Jews living side by side. Certainly, pious Jews would have been offended by their presence. I suspect it's probably Hellenistic people who are raising the pigs rather than Jews. But I think that for Jewish writers, they would have actually thought, yeah, if demons are going to go anywhere, it's going to be in the pigs. Like they're just like the poster child for unclean foods. So if they're going to go anywhere, going into pigs just would make sense.
And, they're so close to predominantly Jewish territory
Yeah.
that you wonder whether this is another way where people are finding a way around the system. Like, do these even Gentile farmers, are they located there because the Jews aren't allowed to do the pig farming?
Oh, right.
But they're kind of close to Jewish territory. And so maybe this is the Jews who are not keeping Torah and
It
eating
could
pig
be,
are like they're supplying the Jewish people with pork that they're not allowed to eat. And so people have found this way around the Torah, right? And then
Could be.
Jesus is simultaneously shutting down that business.
I'm open to that possibility. I mean, there might be Jews who are like, yeah, I had a pulled pork sandwich and it was fantastic. I got to have another one,
True.
All right. One last one, I think, for this episode.
Give or take.
This is the Transfiguration episode as recorded in Mark 9. I'll start with verse 2. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling bright, such as no one on earth could brighten them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us set up 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him. And suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. And here it's just Peter is experiencing, he's given this unique glimpse into the divine world. Like, these are long deceased people that somehow miraculously and are transfigured before them, and Jesus has been caught up in that transfiguration, and they're terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And so Peter, it's just like, you get the sense that Peter just has to say something. Like, he doesn't know how to just stand in awe, speechless. And so he blurts out, I know how to make tents. Does everyone want a tent?
Yep.
It's just like, where did that come from? They look like they want to take a nap. Like, you think they're like here to stay?
Right.
Yeah.
Like so Peter is just caught up in this awesome event that, very few, and he has to do something. He has to contribute. And he just doesn't realize what God's trying to do. So he's another one that's kind of like, read the room, Peter. Keep
Big
your
time.
mouth shut and wait for what God has to tell you about this, or Jesus' explanation. But he can't keep his mouth shut, and so he blurts out this ridiculous idea.
Yeah, it's another example of how Peter is very like us in
Yep,
lots of ways. And like, there's just some people who, when they get nervous, they just talk, right?
Yep,
Or
yep.
they can't just shut up. And like, that's not necessarily me, but there are plenty of other people like that. And this is one of those examples. It's just, it is pretty funny. The way it's framed, like, he didn't know what else to say. So this is
Yep.
like,
And that's
Why are you talking?
it's right.
Exactly.
It's funny they include that in the story,
Yes,
though.
yes.
Like, I don't know.
And that's the way I try to explain it when we're in class. It's like, you don't want to read it as Peter going, we can make a tent for you and you. You got to read it as Peter going, I could make a tent. We can make 3 tents, one for each one of you. Yeah. That's what we'll do. We'll make one for each. Like, you got to see it as that uncomfortable,
Right.
just trying
Blurting.
to, yeah, the words are just tumbling out of his mouth, and he's probably not even making sense to himself.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
So I think this is one of the funnier scenes in the Bible, if you could be there to see it. And of course, he's missing the point. I mean, God is bringing these long deceased people in conversation with Jesus. That's a significant moment. And the purpose is to elevate Jesus. Like the deceased are coming to pay homage to Jesus, which is elevating him. And it's like, I can make everyone attend. It's like, and God's rebuke kind of, at the end, like, yeah, you ruined the whole, event, Peter. And everyone's gone home from the party, and you missed the point. Listen to Jesus.
Well, and one of the chief, charges brought against Jesus is blasphemy, that he is a blasphemer. And when you have the two greatest prophets in Israel's history, Moses and Elijah, having a conversation with them, like, yep, we're buddies. I'm good with them. They're good with me. This is an important piece of testimony to say Jesus is not a blasphemer. Okay, the people that you revere, the ones bringing the accusations against him, the very people you revere are standing there with him. Let's think about this charge a little bit more deeply before we go forward with this thing.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, unfortunately for Peter, is he gets it right. It's good for us to be here. Should have stopped there. And then went to the 10th thing.
And this is especially depending on which gospel you read. I mean, this is on the heels of Jesus being revealed as the Messiah, right? Who do the people say I am? And Peter has this great moment. You are the Messiah, the Christ. And Jesus like, yes, like finally they're connecting the dots. And then Peter follows with, yeah, but I'm not going to let you suffer. Like Jesus is like, yeah, but the Son of Man has to suffer. And he's like, nope, I'll never let that happen to you. Like he has this brilliant moment, and then he calls into question Jesus' plan. And so this is framed as coming after that. Like this is an object lesson for Peter. Jesus is saying perhaps the hardest thing that you don't want to hear, that you're going to have to submit to, that his exaltation means suffering, not just for him, but for all of you. And he challenged Jesus one scene ago. And now he's been given kind of a behind the curtain look. And it's the whole point of that seems to be, like in the way it's canonically ordered, to put Peter kind of in his place on, you need to listen to Jesus, even the stuff that you don't like. And so it's a big moment for him following on the heels of that rebuke. And get behind me, Satan. And now God's given his ringing endorsement for Jesus. And so for Peter, it's doubly significant because of what just happened. I think that's about it.
Enough for today.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of the After Class podcast. After Class because
the best conversations happen
after class.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the After Class podcast. ACP is hosted by Sam Long, John Nugent, and Ron Peters. Social media pictures and descriptions are provided by Darren Harris. Audio mixing and editing is done by Drew Nyquist. If you've enjoyed this episode of ACP, you might also enjoy GLCC's Master of Arts in Practical Theology degree. In this 36-hour program, you will receive first-rate biblical and theological instruction from John, Ron, Sam, and several of their colleagues at Great Lakes Christian College. To learn more about this program, visit glcc.edu. Get practical and go deep at GLCC.